Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Kadabams. I'm Sandesh Kadabam, the Managing Director of Kadabams Group. I warmly welcome each one of you all for our webinar series. Here is to a series of conversations, and these conversations would range from a range of mental health issues, problems, and illnesses. To present these conversations, we've put together a panel of mental health experts, eminent personalities, and this to be opened up for public would mean that anybody could interact. We didn't want this to be a standalone webinar and to make it an interactive conversation and interactive webinars going forward. We're looking forward to various partnerships and collaborations in this journey, and these would enable us to reach larger masses and to various sections of the society. Anybody who's interested directly and indirectly with mental health are most welcome. Here's my acknowledgement to Roundtable India and the Ladies Circle for associating on this webinar. I'll hand it over to Lavanya to introduce Roundtable India and the Ladies Circle.
Hi, I'm Lavanya, and I'm here today representing an international organization that I'm part of called Roundtable and Ladies Circle. We are a non-political, non-sectarian and a zero-overhead organization comprising of young and dynamic entrepreneurs and professionals under the age of 40. Our primary focus is to facilitate the needs of the underserved in the healthcare, educational and skill enhancement sectors. With a pan-India presence, Roundtable India is spread across 124 cities and towns, and Ladies Circle India is spread across 57 cities. In pursuit of educating the underprivileged, our long-term national project, Educate to Enlighten and Freedom Through Education, was launched. The primary focus of infrastructure building in the rural areas aims at promoting education for posterity. Roundtable India and Ladies Circle India in tandem over the last 20 years have built close to 6,000 classrooms across the country. And over the last 10 years, on an average, we have been building a classroom a day, every single day. Amidst the ongoing crisis this year, we are committed towards raising awareness around mental health care and the stigma that it comes with. In pursuit of fulfilling this cause, we are happy and proud to be partnering with Kadabams. Through this interactive and free webinar, we intend to bring awareness around mental health care. We also wish to raise funds which will be used for the treatment of the underserved who require mental health care and support. So we urge you to come forward and donate generously. To know more about our organization, you can look us up at www.roundtableindia.org and ladiescircleindia.org. Thank you for registering for this webinar. Now please sit back and relax and enjoy the webinar.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a series of webinar. I think I would prefer mostly to call this conversations. Our intent as part of Kadabams was to put out this information which allows us to engage with the issues, problems and illnesses around mental health. And what better format to put this out as conversations. I'm Sandesh Kadabam, the Managing Director of Kadabams Group. This being our inaugural series, I said, let me step in as a moderator, let me present and introduce this series of webinar. But I think more so, I'm sitting here as a parent and I would love to hear out, and I have these top of mind questions
and also a new parent the second time. So that's going to be some interesting conversations. And this comes from the House of Kadavams. We are shooting this conversation. We are having this in one of the residential blocks of the cottages, the living spaces of a recovering individual. So this gives you a sneak peek into our residential centers as well. Taking no more time, I think I have to introduce my colleagues, my co-panelists in this webinar. Dr. Vishal Kassal, my colleague, consultant psychiatrist, has been associated with Kadavams for, I've known him for over a decade, and his initial association with Kadavams to that of his training in Australia and then back over as a consultant. I've known him in close quarters, an exceptional professional, deals extensively with the adult psychiatric issues, also works with the teenage and the adolescent population, and we felt he's the best fit to have these conversations, address those questions that I've noted down, and I'm sure would bring in a lot of perspective. Thank you, Dr. Vishal. I know it's a Sunday morning, and thank you. I think it's the best fitted time for all of them. To my immediate left, I have Dr. Anita. Anita has been a consultant clinical psychologist, has changed and taken over multiple roles. She has got her doctorate primarily because of her research in pediatric psycho-oncology. Who better known with an interest in pediatrics, child issues, and also is an active member of the school mental health programs that we run. I'm sure she comes with, I would have initially said hours and days, but now years of experience dealing with children in the schools, addressing them at the ground level. So it's going to be some conversation where she would come back with what the real students look at and what their perspectives are. Here it is. So to open it up, I think I'll set the context, and we'll have a few questions that are on the top of my mind. I think I'll go back to what has made news recently. We've had a lot of conversation, or let's say there's a lot of talk around PUBG being banned, and that leading to a couple of individuals harming themselves and even committing suicide. So my question here is, how do children really get addicted to as much as a game like PUBG, and what really would have prompted them to take such decisions, and where does that come from? I mean, how does that really happen?
Well, so as you rightly put, it's a burning conversation which is happening everywhere at the moment, and it comes from the fact that internet use, or the gaming use, has become some sort of behavioral addiction, which is similar to what we see with the use of illicit substances like cannabis or alcohol or something like that. So it has got various contributory factors into the development of such kind of a behavioral issue, and there are biological factors, and there are certain psychological factors, and there are certain other environmental and social factors which contribute to it. Just to keep it very simple, like there is a deficiency of a chemical called dopamine in the brain, which has been seen in such kind of individuals who use it more and more. The more and more use of such kind of games leads to the release of certain pleasurable chemicals in the brain, one of which is called dopamine, and that is sort of biological issues. And there is genetic history, there is family history of addiction issues in the family or anything of that sort that predisposes such a person. And along with that, there are environmental and social factors, things like peer pressure, things like there are issues ongoing at home. I think probably Anita will be able to better explain those issues which are happening here.
So I think I read somewhere that 25% of world's population who plays PUBG is from India.
Wow.
Right, so that's a huge number. And when it got banned, right, there are what has been observed is that there was a lot of mood fluctuations. There were behavioral, like visible behavioral changes in children or an adolescent who who has used this or who has played this, right? So I think in India, every fifth child plays online games, right? And every 10th child plays it extensively. I'm talking about more than 5 hours.
Wow.
Right? So that's a huge number.
Wow.
Right? So I think from a parent perspective, it's important to identify certain red flags. There are red flags to before it gets worse, because before it gets to addiction, there are red flags. Red flags would be, I would say, a decrease in academic performance, like an immediate dip in academic performance, irritability, mood fluctuations. There could be aggressiveness as well. I would say even sleep disturbances.
Wow.
There is a change in sleep-wake cycle, right? They would spend excessively online, right? They would spend more time online playing. And I would also suggest there are another factor, another change, that is lying. They might lie. They might lie about the time that they've spent, be it to their friends, even to their family, right? And they might be always preoccupied as to, yeah, I want to play the game. That's what, always preoccupied that I need my gadgets, I need my game. So these are few of the red flags that as a parent and as maybe as a family member, or for that matter friends, can observe in somebody who's excessively using this.
Right. No, more so when kids are playing these games for such long hours, what is it that they're really, I mean, is there a sense of satisfaction that they gain, or is it because of their thought process or their thinking style that it's allowing them, I mean, let's just keep this around games now. I mean, there are other aspects that I would also want to look at it. But my real question is, what really makes them to get into it? I mean, I would have some sense of reassurance or satisfaction. Is my understanding on this lines, or is there no connection to the pattern of thinking and something that they get out of the game? What would your thoughts be?
I think absolutely you're right. There is a great sense of instant gratification that they would want. They would want, see, for somebody who's into games, right? For them, what the consequences of what their actions are, like what leads to a particular, I would term it as consequential thinking. That is, what their actions are, they lack that thought about the consequences of their actions later on. So that's the kind of makeup that they have, right? It's more on that instant gratifications, that impulse, the lack of impulsivity that is there. So I think that
is that because nobody on the other side is judging them, or it's that instant gratification is because of their style, or
probably, as Dr. Vishal said, there are a lot of environmental factors. There are a lot of other factors that play a role. Now, for a person, they might not be satisfied with other activities. That's why they would move on to this, right? So that I am saying that's
along with that, as I was alluding to in the earlier part. So there is the general trend over the years is that people have become more and more isolated, and there has been the transition from the place where there used to be a lot of people in a home, there used to be a lot of person-to-person interaction, whereas that is missing now at the moment, and more we see the nuclear families living together, and there is not much of person-to-person interaction which is happening, which leads to the person trying to find that social connection, which they sometimes find vicariously over use of such games where people, there is collaboration, like there's a person sitting here who is playing, and then there is some other person sitting elsewhere who are trying to communicate through the modicum of the game.
I'm sure. I mean, I always believe if something has to be achieved, it's somebody else's objective. You know. So I think when I watched the series on the social dilemma, you know, it's kind of evident, right? It is the psychology that is being used in creating these apps, these games. That is why, you know, I think we're all responding to it. We're all responding to those needs. It comes back to this. You've used this term in the starting part of our conversation, Doctor. you did mention that there is a sense of addiction, right? People do get addicted to gadgets, people do get addicted to games, and I've heard of a few Chinese scholars use compare this to as a serious drug like heroin and cocaine as well. Absolutely. And there's also an English scholar, Dr. Peter. So now coming back to where my question here is, is there some kind of neurosciences involved on the individual or the kids who are dependent on these screens? Do you see that impact their neurosciences? Does that happen, or is it expected to happen over due course of time? What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Like as I was alluding to in the initial part, it is comparable to the addiction of the other substances which you're using, and it has been seen by research that the same brain pathways are lit up when you use screen time or the use of games like PUBG, and there is a release of a chemical called dopamine in the brain, and that is a pleasurable hormone, and the pathways involved in that to just give some small amount of technical details, it is like prefrontal cortex or the frontal portion of the brain where the sort of chemical is released, and that is involved in certain things like attention, planning, execution, and those are the areas which are involved in the addiction or in the addictive behaviors which are seen with the use of these substances.
Right.
So there is a brain basis in simple
Right.
terms.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there an aspect to access here? I mean, is it just because the screens, these games and these devices are easily accessible, or for the kids to immediately rely on, or access to these devices at all play a role?
Access plays a big role, I think, at the moment,
Right.
because it is widely used, and as we have seen, like the role they play in our everyday lives has been increasing day by day, and especially with the coronavirus time at the moment, so everything is online.
Right.
So the social interaction which used to happen before
Yeah.
is severely curtailed. So people find more time and more reasons to go back to the use of
True.
phones and
Yeah.
True.
screens.
I would like to add, there is nowadays kids are born to this kind of a digital world.
Right.
They are exposed to technology, they are exposed to gadgets very early on in their life.
Right.
Right. So because of that, the understanding their knowledge about this is much more, what do you say, much more better than
Right.
their own parents, right? So I think accessibility does make a big role. So I'll just give you an example.
Right.
I know a friend of mine who has 4 kids, right? 4 kids, and because of the lockdown, all the 4 have online classes. So they have 4 plus another 2 laptops. Exclusively for them. So he had to buy 4 laptops for them. That's the kind of world that they're in. Yeah.
Right, right. So I think I'll just draw up the attention to all the viewers. Please feel free to put in as many questions as you want. These questions will really lead our conversation. These are really things that I have thought of, and in the present day world, like Dr. Anita and Dr. Vishal did mention, this has been a pressing issue. Anywhere we go, people say, yeah, I'm sure you guys are a little more busier, people are more dependent, people are more, are they addicted? No, it's addiction, dependent are really terms that are used at, at whims and fancies today, but it's not for us to take a call, right? It's really for these professionals to say where they are, but more, apart from all of that, but we would really like to listen to a few questions. Use any of our social handles to tweet us questions, tag us, or even on the YouTube comment section. I think our team's here to really put it across to us. Diving into something that I'm sure we all have been doing as well, some binge watching, right? So I know it affects mental and physical health.
Yeah.
But let me hear it out from you guys. How much does it? I've never watched a series until 2020. You know, it's the first time I picked a series and I watched one. It's probably my lifestyle, but yeah, I did watch a couple of series now. So where does this stand? You know, how does binge watching really affect the physical and the mental health? I'm sure it's Anita's, Dr. Anita's nice part, setting question for her. Yeah.
So I think we have all been there, done that, right? Thanks to lockdown, I think all of us have binge watched at least one or two series, right? So I would look at it in two ways. There are positives and there are a lot negatives as well.
Okay.
Right? So when I talk about positives, it's a stress reliever. We use that as a coping mechanism to relieve our stress.
Interesting.
Right?
Okay.
So that's one thing that I would look at, right? And also probably it, if I may, it also fosters relationship, like connectedness. Okay, my friend is watching, maybe if I watch it, I will have something to share with my friends. So that's the kind of positives that I'm looking at. But where does it go wrong is when it starts hindering our daily routine, right? It's not nice if we go beyond 3 hours or 4 hours, not even beyond 3 hours. I would suggest not beyond 3 hours to binge watch.
Are you meaning to say we should set a time limit or something?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right.
That I will talk about how to prevent
All
it.
right. Okay.
So, so when I talk about negatives, I've read somewhere that you know, when we finish watching a binge series, we actually feel a loss. We mourn a loss. We feel that there's a vacuum or there is an emptiness that we face, right? And I'm sure most of us have faced that, right? So like we've lost something. So that's where we need to think, yes, it's important to actually prevent or try and recoup our life, recoup these loss. So this loss, what I'm talking about is what we call as a situational depression.
Right.
This is what we call as a situational depression. This occurs when it's very momentary, but after we binge watch a series, right? Now, how do you prevent this? How
And just add to what Anita was mentioning. I'm sorry to cut you off. Along with the psychological aspects which she was mentioning, there are certain physical aspects which can happen because of this.
That was my leading question, actually. Yeah.
Absolutely. So things like you're having headaches, you're having backaches, you're having pain in your necks, you're eating too much or you're eating too less. And you're having vision difficulties, you're having blurry eyes, you have dryness in your eyes, and then with regards to binge watching, and then with regards to excessive use of computers, then you can have certain physical symptoms like you can have carpal tunnel or there is pain in your wrist all the time. So these are certain red flags as Anita was mentioning at the initial stage. So the psychological as well as the physical symptoms have to be taken both at the same time.
Right.
And that means that we need to cut down on the use of it. So there are red flags, the use of these substances.
Dr. Vishal, I just had one probably leading question or a complementing question there. Is there any study that is done to understand binge watching and a pattern in binge watching for persons with known psychiatric illnesses or childhood conditions or anything of that sort, or that has not got any relevance? It's across board similar pattern.
Yeah, sorry. It has got a huge correlation. So there have been studies done, and it has been seen that it's a double-edged sword. So there are certain predisposing conditions which make a person binge watch, and there are certain consequences of binge watching. Okay. So they are quite related in some ways, as in like a person who has anxiety or who is depressed or who is sad in his mood. So it is known that those persons do such kind of behaviors more often than people who are normally. I don't deny that normal people don't watch or binge watch, but they do. But the proportion of people who do that is more. Okay, and people should be. That's a red flag, as in like when you are doing it excessively, it means that there needs to be some self-monitoring of situations.
Right.
Okay, and the consequences are also quite similar to what we do. Like it, as Anita was mentioning, there is a sense of loss once you finish a series or once you finish. So these could be triggering factors for certain predisposed conditions, like you've got history of anxiety in your family, or you have history of depression in your family. So that can cause these can predispose, or this can precipitate a person towards development of such conditions.
Probably, I mean, fact that we've addressed multiple viewpoints, what would be quick takeaways to say how can we prevent binge watching, or how do I as a parent monitor binge watching, especially for parents of teenage kids? I mean, is there something for them to take away and really say that that's something that they need to understand, specific to binge watching?
I think it's one of the best ways is to pace it appropriately, so that even the teens, even the kids enjoy the show rather than stretching it across. Right? So pacing it accordingly would be number one. I think another aspect is, as you had mentioned, set a timer, set a time limit. Right? It's very, very important to set a time limit for them. And I think it's also important to balance out outdoor activities, offline activities, as well as being in front of TV, right?
So it's as simple as these three takeaways.
It's as simple as that. Or there are even minutest things like switch off the autoplay. That if you could switch off the autoplay, and because if there is autoplay, you tend to sit there and watch the entire thing, right? So subtle things, and also it could be things. I've heard one of my friend has done it, where you switch off the Wi-Fi. You time the Wi-Fi connection and you switch off the Wi-Fi after a point of time.
Fantastic.
So these are subtle ways in which you can deal with it.
Right.
Any inputs?
So I would say these are our quick takeaway tips. You want something specific to know about, just again, go ahead, comment, text us. We'll be happy to take them. I think Dr. Anita and Dr. Vishal did talk about it. It is inevitable that the kids will be exposed to technology at a very early age. You know, I'm sure the metros, tier 1, tier 2 cities pretty much has no divide now. Phones have bigger penetration than anything else in this country and pretty much the world. What are the consequences now? I mean, you know, how does these early exposures have an impact on the kids' self-esteem or a certain sense of belongingness? I'm not sure. I mean, that's the point of view I'm coming from. I mean, please feel free to add. What are we looking at there?
So, if I may, sir. So, what I understand, as I had spoken about earlier, they're born into this world, right? There is an early exposure that they get, right? So there are both, again, I would say, pros and cons to it, right? The pros are they're more there is more social connectedness.
Okay.
There's more social connectedness. There's creativity. There is a spread of. There can be this is now the platform for social awareness programs. So they can be more socially there, right? So I think these are some of the pros that I would suggest, but some of the negatives, if I may say, so some of the negatives is what I might say, that there is a huge impact that it can have on their identity, right? Probably negative self about identifying themselves negatively, and of course on their self-esteem, right? For example, simple things. I'm not fit offline, but I connect well online, right? I'm better online, right? People accept me online better, right? That's one way. There is also blaming, right? Blaming that happens where the child says, I'm extremely stressed out, or a teen says, I'm extremely stressed out. This is one way to, if I'm online, that's one way to relieve my stress, right? There's also, so there's these kinds. So I've come across teens who would say, I've got 10 Instagram comments on a particular post. 9 are positive, ma'am, but 1 is negative. And that has hurt me. I've taken that very personally. So they don't look at the 9 good comments, but they'll look at that 1 negative comment. And that they would take it personally, where it will affect their self-esteem. So this is the kind of
There's a lot of
impact.
validation.
Yeah,
probably.
absolutely, absolutely. Anything that you
And the normal rules which govern our social interactions, somehow they seem to missing in our virtual interaction online, which happens as in like if you meet a person in face to face, the rules which apply, like I need to stop myself from telling some things about the other person. So that degree of accommodation adjustment, that I think is significantly lacking when we interact online. So we need to educate our children about that. As in like we need to tell them that when the same rules apply when you interact online. Okay, so they learn it very early.
Right.
So there should be some education among them.
I mean, is my takeaway and my understanding right that it's a lot of issues around identity formation, their self-identity also, you know, you have the digital or the online world playing a role.
Absolutely.
And one has to watch out. Is that
Yes.
the takeaway there?
Yes, yes,
Interesting.
absolutely.
Interesting. We have spoken about it, but if you wish to add something, you know, the environmental factors, you know, what's the kind of role that they play in predisposing the child towards a gadget or tech addiction. Is there something more to peer pressure alone, or is it more of their self personality? I mean, is there a point of view there of how it comes from?
So I think it's a combination of both.
Okay.
So it's one is everyone is using it, so I tend to use it. Okay, and then the reduction in the social interaction, that has contributed to a lot. And but having said that, so what I would, as Anita was telling before, like there should be more amount of time we spend with our kids at home,
Okay.
offline, involve them in different kind of activities. Could be as simple as like physical exercise, yoga, or playing some games with them. Okay, and even using online things like playing games or watching series. Okay, so it would be comfortable and it would be more easier to moderate that when we do it with them.
Right.
And then we set a time limit.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
so that would be more acceptable to them, and we can
So it's more of a role model then.
more of a role model. Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
And along with that, like when you say the role model thing, like we ourselves tend to use these digital devices a lot nowadays. So as much as possible, we should minimize them,
Okay.
so that they see us and learn from us that
Yeah.
it's not to be used all the time.
Absolutely.
True.
I think the irony is I'm using a screen while not the paper while asking these questions. It comes to this interesting part, right? How much is too much monitoring for a parent, and how much is less monitoring for how less is less monitoring for a parent? I mean, is there something to it? I mean, I'm sure this part would have a lot of takers in this webinar. There are a lot of parents listening to us.
I think this is a very, very important and a valid question which gets asked a lot to all of us.
Right.
So I think there is, as parents, you need to identify, or probably there should be a clear understanding between the difference of spying and monitoring in a healthy manner, right? So I think that's where you need to strike a balance as to how do you monitor it in a healthier way, rather than spying on the child for a long period of time.
Right.
So I think very, very important is key is for communication.
Right.
Right. It's important to communicate, have an open interaction
Okay.
about digital world.
All right.
Right. About the content, about the risks that is there.
Right.
Right. That's very, very important. Apart from that, I think especially for teenage parents, establishing a trust-based relationship.
Okay.
Right?
That's interesting.
A trust, because you can't monitor them, you can't be with them throughout the day, throughout when they use it. So it's important to trust trust the relationship, so that they don't hide, they don't manipulate, right? They don't lie, and they are open for communication, open and reach out to you when there is a need, right? So that is where I would really suggest. Doctor, anything from your side?
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree with what Dr. Anita said. So more and more communication.
Yeah.
That's the key to build a good trust. Once there is a trust, and then you can definitely build upon that. And if we can, in fact, we can plan for activities. What kind of activities you do online? Okay,
Interesting.
So it could be 3 things like learning, or it could be something like entertainment, or it could be social interaction. So we can in fact sit with them, make a plan on how to divide the time for these kind of activities, whereby we help them to build a better or healthier profile of
Sure.
the digital interaction. And apart from that, I would say the early recognition of things like as Anita was saying, you're hiding, you're deleting your browsing history, or you're isolating yourself more and more, or you stop using the devices as soon as the parent steps in. Okay, so that indicates that it's not a very healthy pattern, and that should be recognized at the earliest and start the communication at the right time.
Interesting. So when do you allow them to, or how do you support them to make these independent decisions? And when it is in the online world, I mean, I know it is communication, but is there more to it? And how does the trust as a factor play in for responsible usage of screens? I mean, this might be more relevant for the teenagers maybe, but where does that come in?
Well, as I was telling, so sitting with them and plan to use it in a proper way, so that is very important. And along with that, so the more, like, for suppose they are having certain issues using the internet, like they once they go online and they become irritable, or they isolate themselves, or their mood fluctuates a lot after that. So that's a early recognition sign that you need to talk to them and get help at the earliest in those situations.
Right. So I do understand regulating content in the digital world is not an easy ask for a parent, though parental controls are available on your browser settings, on your computers, on your devices. But how much of parental controls would you step in? But then content and time, I think they are correlative here. If you could throw light on what could be signs to flag off, signs to worry about, and would consumption of a different kind of content exhibit a different type of behavior or responses by these individuals? Are there some really alarming signs, or there's some moderately alarming signs, something that the parents should know and are a takeaway, something that would come across?
Right. I think, as you rightly put in, content is the one that can be very, very harmful than time frame, right? Now, when I say content, right, so if content, it depends upon, generally it depends upon the objective of the usage, right? If the content is in respect to learning, growth, right, it is more for knowledge purpose, then if you're spending 3 to 4 hours, not more than that, but if you're spending 3 to 4 hours, it's accepted, right? But if you are using even if you're sitting for 1 hour or half an hour and you're watching a very, very harmful content, it can cause distraction. It can really have an effect on your emotional and behavioral and also physical state of mind, right? So this is something, so I would suggest it's all about content. It's about knowing what the child is seeing. So I would suggest for a parent to, if possible, I'm sure for teens it's not, but for younger kids, if you're sitting with younger children, it's important to screen the content.
Interesting.
Right? It's important to screen, watch it before you would show it to a child, so that you know if there are any mature content that is not good for the child, you can avoid that. But for a teen, it's I know that you can't give that part. So it should, again, I would go back to what Dr. Vishal and myself, we had spoken about trust-based. You give them, it's all about trust, and give them the autonomy.
Right.
It's important to give them that autonomy and have belief that they are doing the right thing.
Right.
Right? So that's my take on it.
Absolutely, I would agree with you on that. And the more trust you build with your kids, especially the teenagers, the more it is easier to monitor them, because obviously, as in your question, how much is too much? So spying is counterproductive. That's what I would say. So there's no simple solution for that.
Right.
But the more trust, the more conversation you have, and the more you watch out for all the other signs that the person is getting used to it, or he is having consequences from the use of it. So the earlier you recognize those signs and earlier you seek help, I think probably that's the key there.
Right. I mean, it's something that Dr. Anita, I think, would probably throw light. Are there different parenting styles psychologically? I mean, that impacts behaviors? Are there different models or names in the world of behavioral health?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So there are 3 types of parenting styles that's there.
Right.
So there's somebody who's passive.
Right.
There is somebody who's very assertive.
Right.
And there is aggressiveness, aggressive parenting. So these are the 3 basic styles of parenting that is there. So somebody who's passive parenting would be basically they are not very involved in the child's life, right? So that would be passive. Aggressiveness is being very authoritative in nature. Okay, right. You're very authoritarian in there, right? The opinions of yourself is thrust upon the child, right? So that is the authoritarian style, right? Whereas being assertive parent is a healthy mix of both, right? Where you are able to bring in that opinion, or you're able to probably give your opinions to the child without hurting them.
Fantastic.
Right? That's basically.
I had a couple more questions. I know we are a couple of minutes away from our 1 hour slot, but I'm having issues reading the questions that's coming from the viewers. We'll fix that in the meantime.
Sure.
I think we're getting into the world of from the world of etiquettes to netiquettes. So where does cyber safety of a child come in? I really want to spend some time talking about this today, to say how should a parent introduce netiquettes. I won't say good netiquettes. I mean, it's netiquettes is netiquettes. Yeah. So how should a parent introduce netiquettes to a child, and and ensure cyber safety of their own child?
It should be started as early as possible.
Sure.
And as soon as they start using these things, and one very clear, I think probably all of us know, but just to reiterate that, is to always educate them not to give out any personal information online. So as we know, many of the things which are said online are not true in fact. So no personal information, never share your locations with online. So it can definitely be misused. So I think these are some of the things which come to my mind. I think
so anonymity is absolutely important.
Right,
so,
right. I think I would just take over from what Dr. Vishal said. It's about, as Dr. Vishal said, it's about starting early, I believe in the fact that you should start educating the child about the risk factors, about what is out there in the digital world very, very early in life, right? So things like there are predators, okay, there are cyberbullying that happens.
Do you still talk about it because even though your child has not experienced it, is it safe? Or is it something that you should not talk about it and then give room for your child to think about those issues? Especially about, let's say, predators in the online world. Now, what's the safe way to do it? What's the right way to do it?
I think I think as you all know, as we all know that nowadays every child has access to phones or their access to technology, right? As you said, the safest way to communicate would be to probably create a safe space.
Right.
Okay, create a safe space, and as we know that according to, I think, American Academy of Pediatrics, they've come up with age range and that associated to the digital usage. Now, for somebody who's 2 years, less than 2 years, it's not good for you to even provide them with any kind of digital usage, but
so less than 2 years.
Less than 2 years.
Okay.
But stick
absolutely
to
no
absolutely no screen. But if possible, if there's a requirement, video calling.
Yep.
Right, video chatting.
Yep.
Because obviously that's that's how we can connect. But below 2 years is absolutely no. So whereas for preschoolers, it's more or less about educational videos that you could show them, right? And when you look at grade school or high school, we have to make sure that their usage does not interfere with their extracurricular activities.
Sure.
Right? And for all age group, it's about with right monitoring. It's all about right monitoring. So that's how it is placed. So you have to speak to them at the time when I would suggest, if you're talking to a teen, right? If you're talking to a teen, it's more with a lot of examples, right? Real life experiences that actually connects. Videos, there are a lot of educational videos on this. So that's how they connect it better, right? So as going back to the question, right, it's all about starting early, educating them, creating a safe space so that they can come and talk to you about it. Like, again, subtle things like setting difficult passwords, right, making sure that you monitor their contacts. What are they,
would you tell the kid not to share the password?
Absolutely. I would not to share the passwords with anybody, but yes, to a parent.
That's interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, just to add to the question which you asked, I think probably it is always good to educate them that there will be cyberbullying or there will be negative consequences like sexting or something of that sort. So, so
we do talk about
talk about
even though it has not happened with the child, there were no direct encounters or indirect encounters. You still talk to the child about all of these.
Absolutely. Very, very vital. So they know what to expect if something of that sort happens, and they come to you as soon as that happens, so that you can stop it at the earliest.
Right. So it comes to this, right? I personally believe bullying does exist. While bullying exists in the offline world, there is a lot of chances and a prevalence for bullying to exist in the digital world as well. So my question to both of you, and there are loads of questions that has come from the viewers, so this would be my concluding question. What would you do when you know that your kid has been cyberbullied? What is it that, as a parent, as a well-wisher, as a guardian, or anybody, when you see signs of your child being cyberbullied, what are those steps that you need to take?
Right.
So
sure.
I would say the first and the foremost thing which we should always try to do is not to blame them or not to argue or fight with them. Okay, and not to hold them responsible, not to hold the kids responsible for bullying. And the next one would be to talk to them, understand them what is happening, understand the nature of the interaction which is leading to such bullying which is happening, and then keep a digital record of what is really happening, so that there is some evidence which can be taken back to the relevant authorities, like if it is in the school, to the school, or if it is outside the school, then if it is very severe, to the law enforcement agencies. Okay, so that there is some help for that, and that would be the last resort. But before that, we should, as I was telling, not to blame them, support them during this process, and
do not blame them.
Do
not
That's
blame
the
them,
key.
yes.
And play that role of being a supportive parent.
Absolutely.
I mean, the reason we're emphasizing this is one common source for a lot of kids to reach into our services, be it at the level of our schools, be it in the school programs that we run, the outpatient services that we run. So I've really come across this, that bullying probably was one of the trigger points or the common offset. So we wanted to emphasize this point. Questions around this is something that we would be very, very happy to take and address them. I know we are we're at that end minutes of this talk, but I would take liberty to request both of you, if you could continue this, to take those questions that everybody has asked. Yeah. So something that you started off with. So I think this is one of those questions. Does gadget addiction increase chances of developing depression or anxiety?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So it is both a predisposing factor as well as a consequence of the usage of that, and there are certain studies which have shown that the use of antidepressant medications has helped to reduce the use of internet online, or the use of digital devices and digital interaction. So it is, and the improvement in anxiety and depression has further led to healthier patterns of life and healthier ways of coping.
Right. So to all the viewers, excuse me if I'm not going in the right chronology. As and how I'm getting access to the questions, I'm just reading them out for you. So one of the questions, I can't see who's asked this, but when both parents are working during lockdown from home, children are often left unsupervised. Any suggestions to curb gaming and excessive video watching and gaming again? So I mean, it's a limiting factor, and it's also a challenging time. So I think we've addressed this in the conversation. It's a lot of trust and talk, but if there's any other point we wish to add here, I'll just have this fixed in the meantime while you take that question.
Well, I would definitely say that more
I have access only to 4 questions.
More online, more offline activities are the need of the hour at this stage, and it's a difficult situation when both are working online and there is no regulation of what the child is doing. Try to involve the child in interaction with other kids around, if there are any, or even if that is not possible, I think probably spending some quality time whenever they get time, and both the parents get time, quality time, meaning like you give all the attention to the child in that space, and you engage the child in a meaningful activity during that time. It could be half an hour, it could be 1 hour in a day. So whenever you spend that time, your whole attention should be towards the child, towards understanding what is the child missing and what is the child communicating by using these gadgets. Okay, so there is the development of trust which happens from the earlier stages of life.
Right.
I'd like to add there, just as
just look out, we have a lot of questions, so yeah, sorry.
So just a quick this one, that when Dr. Vishal said it's about time, and it's about making the time, right? When you're sitting with the child, when you're making that time, please make sure that as parents you don't have gadgets around as well, right? You also be free of gadgets, and you're having a healthy conversations or family time. That's a key.
Absolutely. So Priya Rangarajan has asked us this: in a single child scenario, it's being easy to restrict access of gadgets, but how do we help children engage themselves? I think it's a very pertinent question in these COVID times and when the schools are off. So tips to engage themselves. Anything that you would suggest, Anita, and in a single parent scenario?
So can you please?
Yeah, I'll repeat the question. So in a single child scenario, it's being easy to restrict the access to gadgets, but how do we help child engage themselves?
So yeah, I think setting up some aspects of probably which increases the self-esteem. I think that's very, very important, which as we go back some amount of identity formations, for example, making them do some gardening, which is for themselves, right? Or engaging them in activities around the household, right? When
you mean actively involve them in the household work?
Actively.
So what I would say, add to what Anita is saying, just prepare a kind of timetable.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, so which includes some amount of time for using devices or using, you watch or you play something online. So along with that, more should be offline. Like
Yes.
you make a schedule, like for some time I am going to engage them in arts and crafts. Sometimes I am
Right.
going to engage them in their studies. Sometimes I am going to play with them for some time. Sometimes I am going to make them do certain things, like I go with them for a walk or yoga or cycling or whatever.
Right.
So some degree of time.
Some degree, yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. So Geetika Singh has asked this question. I think it's extremely important and a direct question. How to handle an aggressive child when you control screen time?
It's a very, very valid
Very
question,
Yeah.
right? So one thing you probably will have to understand is the child being aggressive because of this restrictions during lockdown. Is it because of lockdown that the child is become more aggressive because spending more screen time, right? One thing we might have to understand is maybe the child is reacting out there, they are expressing their distress level maybe in an aggressive way, right? So I would suggest one is to bring in the concept of reinforcement. It's
Okay.
very, very important, especially to handle an aggressive child, is to bring in positive as well as negative reinforcement, so that the child learns or cope healthy ways of dealing or healthy ways of expressing themselves.
Interesting.
That's
So
my ways.
just to add what Dr. Anita told, so positive reinforcement is when the child is having a conversation, you don't argue back to them when you are dealing with an aggressive child. So you have a conversation with them, and if the child is able to express what is happening to it, you respond back in a positive way. And if the child is not responding back, or if the child is becoming more and more aggressive, so then take off some privileges, like that is the negative reinforcement. That's what we mean. And it's equally important to use both strategies.
That's interesting. I think Ms. Geetika Singh has also had a follow-on question. We've addressed this. What alternative we can use to engage the child in COVID time? My children refuse to even step out, forget home, step out of the room as well. So would you wish to add something? It's the same follow-on question from Geetika.
I think probably we have answered this question as
sure.
well.
Sure.
The question,
Just picking one more. Is it not technology and these things that have given screen to an entire generation, opening the world? So there are a lot of advantage. How can we better use it for advantage?
Absolutely. So that's what when I was alluding to, the planning of the screen time. Okay, so when you use it for activities like learning, absolutely it is vital. It is indispensable in the present age, and there should be some screen time for entertainment as well. Like for kids, it could be cartoon shows. For teenagers, it could be some Netflix series or some sort of series which they see, and then there should be some time for communication in a healthier way. Like you communicate through Facebook, or you communicate through any social or WhatsApp or social media. So sorry to take the names, but I would say it is absolutely vital you divide equal time for all of that, and see to it that the child sticks to it.
Okay. I think there are still many more questions, but due to paucity of time, we will have to conclude here. I think while I would allow the panelists to make their concluding points. Considering the last question, we are here to tell you that the internet is here to stay. The screens are here to stay. Its nature, its form will only keep on getting re-engineered, changing, and innovation is going to be the key, right? So we are here to talk to each one of you all about the healthy use of internet and using these screens in the appropriate way. This is where I would take an understanding from this conversation today. It cannot stop here. There has to be many more conversations. Any concluding remarks, Dr. Vishal, while we wind up? There are a few more questions. I think we will reply back to them personally on our comments and go back to them in person. Yeah,
Sure.
any concluding remarks?
The concluding remarks, which I would basically say, take home message from my end, would be to recognize what is where to stop using this and when to recognize that the child is using it excessively, and at that stage take appropriate actions, as we have said, at home itself, and if it is not possible, reach out for professional help.
Absolutely. I think my concluding statement also will be the same. Please understand that you need to create, as parents, you need to create a safe space, a trust built relationship with your child, so the child opens up, talks to you, right? And there should be more emphasis on open communication and specific family time, right? Set family time so that there is more discussions based. And if in case if you feel that you're unable to handle the situations, or you're unable to handle the issues at home, especially in terms of screen, please reach out for professional help.
Fantastic. So here is to the end of this first conversation. I think we enjoyed it. It's certainly better than doing it on the electronic platforms and staring into the screen. It gives us a little more liberty to talk. Thank you for putting this through. I think the team at Kadabums, we have a new communications team. They're doing a great work. Thank you for that. And the concluding remark has come down from both the co-panelists, but just one statement. There is a clear difference between an issue, problem, and an illness. Do not self-diagnose. Dr. Google is not your solution. There are professionals, there are individuals who are trained for at least a decade to 7 years, 8 years, and they will go through the similar trainings like the other streams of medicine. Reach out for professional help. They are as normal as each one of us, and they are open to conversations like each one of us. So this is one of our attempts to say that mental health professionals are also approachable, and they are open for detailed conversation and profiling, and do not rely on your own sources to make conclusion. This has been our learning from the school mental health programs that we run for over 7,000 to 10,000 kids, and what better way to take it out to all of you. I hope each one of you all enjoyed watching what we presented today, and this being the first of the many to come, your feedbacks are always welcome. Signing off for the day. Have a fantastic day ahead. I'm Sandesh Kadavam. Thank you very much.
Oh, good.